Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session on how to avoid the 5 readability mistakes. So glad to see so many of you here. This is such an important topic when we're thinking about how we retain clients, which of course is really important for our revenue. I want to begin with a quote, which is something that I heard Andy Bounds say many years ago, which was that effective communication isn't actually about what you say or write, it's about what people do afterwards. And as you know, the job of a suitability report is to help people make an informed decision. But in order to do that, they've got to actually understand the advice. And in order to do that, they've got to read it. And so, in essence, the value of your communication, the value of your expertise actually rests on your ability to communicate, which is something that is actually quite challenging for many of you because you spent years amassing a lot of technical information and taking a lot of exams, and yet trying to convey something that's quite complicated to someone that doesn't share your expertise is pretty difficult. And yet the good news is, with some changes in mindset and some disciplined practice and some rules of thumb, you can actually make quite a big difference in quite a short space of time. But I'm afraid the bad news is that we actually do need these changes. This was some research that Vouch for shared with me last November, showing that nearly a third of people don't read correspondence in full, which is really sort of heartbreaking for you because, a lot of you spend loads of time putting your energy and expertise into these reports, and to know that they're not being read in full is rather dispiriting. But not only that, for clients as well, if clients read something and they just feel overwhelmed, there are so many things vying for our attention that they very easily just push them aside. And then you've got to chase them, and nobody likes being chased. It's a bit of a waste of time, and the client experience isn't as good as it could be. So let's change that. Because as I said, if your writing isn't being read, then it's not going to be understood. And if it's not understood, then clients can't make an informed decision. And then we run the risk of, complaints or not being able to meet the consumer duty requirements. So, but it's not just about consumer duty. Of course, that is really important. Writing so that you can be easily read and easily acted upon basically helps your client retention, and that then leads to more secure revenue streams. Also, when clients are thinking about, am I getting good value, one of the things that they think about is, well, do I actually understand the advice? If you're not getting unprompted emails from clients saying thank you for making that so easy to understand, you're missing out on opportunities for those sticky clients, which is something that people will get once they follow my process. If you're looking to sell your firm, of course, you need those sticky clients. If you're worried about wealth transfer as well, so I'm not sure if any of you have seen the Schroders report, which looked at what women want from financial advisors, which was they want flexibility in communication, they want proactive communication, and they want to make sure that they can understand it. And lastly, no one wants complaints. And by really focusing on making sure that your writing is clear and easy to understand will help to mitigate those. So the session is being recorded. If you'd like a replay, just scan that QR code. It'll take you to my LinkedIn profile and just put replay in the message, and I'll send it your way. I'll take questions at the end, but I'll be asking for input as we go, and we'll be finished by 10 o'clock. So what I wanted to cover in this hour was really avoiding some common pitfalls. I've worked in the industry for a long time, and I do see these 5 mistakes that are made sort of day in, day out, which are really fueling those readability statistics. So by the end of this, you'll not only be able to recognize them, but in doing so, you'll be able to avoid them. We'll look at how you adopt the right mindset for effective writing. My background is psychology, so I believe that everything starts with mindset. Once you get into the right mindset, then your behavior is much easier to achieve the outcome. Then I'll show you my 6-step framework to help get more attention, more understanding, and more action. You'll be able to book a call if you'd like to work with me further. But really, ultimately, you'll be able to understand how you're going to improve your communications, which then going to in turn improve your relationships and earn you more money. If we've not met before, my name is Melissa, and I specialize in helping advisors and power planners to win and keep clients through effective communication. I wrote the PFS Suitability Report Writing Guide. My background is advertising and copywriting and psychology. I come from a long line of advertisers, so we're really interested in what the words that we can use to change behavior. I'm a certified coach and I've been trained in NLP up to master's level. And I now sit on the advisory board for the Finance in Society Research Institute. But I don't want to talk too much about me. If you'd like to find out more, scan that QR code. That'll take you to my LinkedIn profile. But I've worked with hundreds of power planners and advisors. And as I mentioned, I see these 5 common mistakes. And I'm going to run through these now. And what I'd like you to do is, by the end of them, let me know which one or ones that you recognize, because I'd like to tailor this session according to, what you need the most. I want to give you as much as I can. So the first is people use a lot of technical language, a lot of abstract words, a lot of 3-letter acronyms. And unfortunately, clients just don't understand those words. We speak a very different language in our industry, and we can sometimes forget or sometimes not even realize that these words that we're using, which are so everyday to us, just aren't well understood outside the industry. The next is that we pack a lot of information into sentences, which can make them very long. And then that leads to very long reports because we're worried that clients need all the information so that they can make an informed decision. But that can lead to, 20-page reports just for a pension switch. So that can be another area. Many firms are using really outdated templates or lots of standard wording, which clients can perceive as impersonal. Number 4 is focusing really on the words and the data, and not enough on making that come alive, not enough on making it attention grabbing, not enough on color or diagrams or illustrations, but just the data. And that means that it can be quite hard to read and can be easily ignored. And then 5th is really just firms have a lot of processes around compliance and risk mitigation and investment strategy and so on, but actually very few have processes which are geared up to help them communicate well. And that's what I want to show you at the end. So which one resonates with you? Which one would you say, oh, actually, I recognize all of them, or maybe it's the first one? And you can either set your chat to communicate with me directly or share it with everybody. Which ones are you nodding your head to? Oh, Anne, you said you raised your hand. I'm afraid I can't unmute you because it's a webinar. Number 2, number 5. Very common. Any more? I don't want to move on until I've got most of your votes in, because I want to tailor the session accordingly. So be brave. Very, very common. Number 4. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Right. It's a good spread. So remember, effective communication isn't actually about what you say or write. It's about what people do afterwards. So with that in mind, we're going to be looking at how we can start to address some of these common mistakes which are fueling those readability statistics. I'm on an absolute mission to improve those statistics. So let's look at mindset. And there are fundamentals really to get right. And one of the first principles is that we need to write for our reader, not for compliance, not for anybody else, but for our reader, because it is their report, it's their life, it's their advice that we're sharing that's going to impact their their life. So we must write for our reader first and foremost. And when we do that, so much of the communication that follows becomes much easier. So, how do we do this, you might say? Well, when you speak to any professional writer, they will all generally have someone that they hold in their mind as they're writing. It's very difficult to write something that you think is going to work for everybody. So we need to hold them in our mind when we write. The second is then we need to write from their point of view. So what I mean by this is when you write for someone's point of view, you convey more meaning and then you're going to get more action. So as an example, I live in Bristol, and a number of years ago, they developed the docks into apartments and high-end flats. And yet this was the developer's office. So can you see that sign? If you were walking past as a passerby, would that sign mean anything to you? Put a yes or a no in the chat if you would know what actually that meant. No. And that's because it's been written from the perspective of the developer. But if they had changed it and called it show home, then as a passerby, you would know what that meant. And you would then know that you could go in and have a look and see if it would be somewhere that you would like to live. And that's because that's the power of writing from your reader's perspective. Again, Purple Bricks have just changed their signage. So rather than say for sale, which has been written from the vendor's perspective, the passerby can look at that sign and go, would I like to own this house? And it's been written from the passerby's perspective. So let's just give you a quick exercise. This is something that I see a lot. This kind of heading is something I see a lot. VCT subscription recommendations. How might you show home this? How might you turn that into something that would be more meaningful for your reader, and therefore they're more likely to engage with it and follow up and make some action, take some action? You can use the chat. Any ideas on how you could turn that into something more meaningful for your clients, for your readers? The way to think about this is if the if the if the bit that comes under it is the answer, what is the question? So I'll share how I turn this into something that's more meaningful for a client. Your tax saving plan. We all want to save tax. This sounds relevant to me. Do you see what I mean? It's instantly engaging. So the second principle is, having written for our reader, we then need to write so that our readers can fly through our writing. And this is because we've become a nation of skimmers, not readers. We have got so much information to read on very, very small screens often. And there is so much vying for our attention that we are just scanning things and seeing what hooks our attention. And then we'll invest more minutes if we think, actually, that is worth, I am interested in that. That is going to make my life better. See, excuse me. So you can see your tax saving plan. Instantly, you can see that's going to make my life better. VCT, you see, again, a three-letter acronym. We don't know what that means. Subscription, I'm not sure what I'm subscribing to. You see what I mean? There's a lot of disconnect between what we mean and what clients understand. So what we also have to bear in mind is that our attention spans are becoming ever, ever shorter. And Johan Hari wrote a brilliant book quite recently called Stolen Focus. And in it, he points to some research that says that we can't now pay attention for more than 3 minutes without getting distracted. So that's the time that it takes to boil an egg. So we've got to be really mindful that it's not enough just to give people information. we've got to learn how to grab their attention so that they'll read on. Because if you don't know how to grab attention, we'll just get ignored. And then it's back to the endless chasing, it's back to the ghosting. And nobody likes to be in that situation. Um, Toby was a client I worked with. He went through the program and he'd had a brilliant first meeting with someone back in October. It all was looking rosy. She was saying the right things and got really excited. And he was pretty confident that she was going to become a client. But then he followed up with her, nothing. The days became weeks, the weeks became months. And eventually he went on the course and implemented what I'd shown him around how to get attention. And he got a response the next day. So has anyone else felt really frustrated when clients go quiet, or you've just not really known how to chase or follow up without sounding pushy or rude? Is it something that you're faced with fairly regularly, or is it something that actually isn't too much of a challenge for you? Rarely, but it definitely does happen at times. Yes. And it can be quite difficult to strike that balance. Um, if it is an issue for you, I'm very happy to look at some of your follow-up communications. So if you want me to have a quick look at them, scan that code and I will I've made 5 slots available for people on the webinar. So just put follow up in the Calendly notes and I'll be very happy to look, because sometimes it just requires a little tweak. Some of which you'll be learning today, but it can be quite helpful just to have a grounding in this. So let's now look at those 5 common mistakes in more detail. We've got a range of them. So the first is really to recognize that once you get this right, your reading experience will be just like eating a pot of Pringles. And once you've eaten one, you just can't stop, and your attention is guided through the document. And you get to the end of it and you go, oh, I feel like I'm in a well-informed position and I know what to do next, rather than just going, oh, that looks really hard work, I'm just going to push that to the side. So we talked about the very common one of using a lot of technical language, those VCT subscriptions, a lot of acronyms and so on. And the problem with this, as you'll know, is that if you come across language that you don't understand, what happens is it really interrupts the reading experience. And then that can lead us to thinking, this isn't for me. Maybe I should know this. I don't know this. I feel a bit stupid, but I don't want to feel stupid. I want to feel intelligent and I want to feel reassured and I want to feel like I'm making good decisions with my money. But all of a sudden, there seems to be this distance between me and the advisor. Do I trust them? I'm not sure. So you can see all of this friction is starting to build up between you and the reader. And what we want to do is just take all of that away and shorten the distance between us and the reader. The other problem with this is that, while we might talk about different, terminologies, like VCT subscriptions and so on, or crystallized or things like that, a lot of terminology that we think actually isn't jargon, isn't well understood by investors. So this was some research that Boring Money released last year, which shows that only 45% of UK investors could confidently explain what a fund is. And that's UK investors. That's not just the whole population. Only 33% of investors could confidently explain what an equity is. And you can see down here, only 20% of people can only explain what asset allocation is. So just put a yes in the chat if you used those terms last week. We use these terms pretty much every day, thinking that people understand them. And actually, this is quite shocking research showing that they often don't. I was talking to a client the other day, and she was in a meeting with an investment manager, and they were sort of running through various scenarios. And the investment manager popped out of the room, and the client leaned over to my client and said, "Just remind me, what's a basis point again?" And they had been talking at length about these various scenarios, these various situations, including basis points, and she just didn't know and didn't feel like she could ask. So this is very important that we do what we can to make sure that we're choosing words that our clients understand. So in a moment, I'm going to give you a word, and I want you to tell me via the chat the first thing that comes into your mind when you hear this word. So the word is seaside. What comes into your mind instantly? Don't overthink it. What comes into your mind? Sun, seaside, bucket, holiday. Great. The next word, crystallized. What comes into your mind immediately? Again, don't overthink it. Crystallized. Chemistry, ginger, taking money from your pension. Okay. Well, when most people hear the word crystallized that aren't in the industry, they think of crystallized ginger. But of course, actually, what we mean, as Angie's just said, when we're using this word crystallize, often what we mean is that's our pension income pot. So we want to be using words that are familiar to our reader, not words that they don't understand. So when we're thinking about using uncrystallized, which many of you might not recognize as a jargony term, remember it does have different connotations outside the industry. So the rule of thumb is to really use familiar words, not fancy words. And remember, we're skimmers, not readers. So as soon as someone comes across a word that they don't understand, that's building in some friction, and we're edging them away from us when we want to keep them engaged. So the next common mistake is packing a lot of information into sentences, into paragraphs, and that then makes the reports very, very long. And I think sometimes suitability reports can be rather like remote controls, in that there's just so much in there that it becomes really hard for them to actually do their job, which is, to help clients make that informed decision. A lot of them just don't understand it, or they feel overwhelmed. And when I ask people, well, what's behind you including so much information? This is typically what people say. I'm just worried about leaving something out, and that means they're not going to be able to make that informed decision, which the suitability report is designed to do. Or I want them to trust me because, I'm looking after their life savings. And so I want to demonstrate that their money is in safe hands and they can trust me. Or some people say, I'm so focused on what I have to tell them because they're writing with what they think is compliance in mind, that I forget who I'm actually writing for, which is why when you keep your reader in mind, compliance will look after itself. When you can demonstrate that you've got your reader in mind and you've been thinking about what they need to know, using language that they understand, compliance will look after itself. Yes, of course, you do need to include your objectives, the recommendations and why they're suitable, the disadvantages, some alternatives as to why you haven't gone down the route that you're choosing, and the disadvantages and the costs and charges. But other than that, I think a lot of people misunderstand how much needs to go in. And so therefore we have these very, very long reports, which can be just overwhelming. And then we run the risk of the reports just not being read, of getting complaints, and potentially losing clients. So what we need to do is craft those communications so that they work. We'll really be thinking about what is the absolute bare minimum that they need to know, that I can make it really engaging and easy to read, so that they are in that informed position. So a rule of thumb here is to try and aim to keep one idea per sentence. Very often I'll see very, very long sentences because people are packing all sorts of points in. And often it's well intentioned. You know, you're wanting them to have the information. It's just that probably you've not had any teaching experience. So you don't know how to structure and sequence information so that it can be easily absorbed and acted upon. And then remember to write for your reader. Do they need to know this? I think sometimes we can get very enthusiastic about the technicalities of our work because we love problem solving and we want to show off our expertise. And yet that can sometimes then tip into creating very long documents, which may be fascinating for us, but less so for our reader. So get really disciplined and rigorous. Does your reader need to know this to make an informed decision? Number 3, using outdated templates or lots of standard wording, which clients can perceive as impersonal. So imagine if you were struggling with mental health, you had quite a lot of anxiety, and you weren't sure whether to go and see a doctor or a therapist or just keep talking to your friend down the pub. But you plucked up enough courage and you went to see a therapist, and she was lovely. He or she was lovely. You were able to show and say what was going on with your struggles. But then you got a report following that meeting that sounded like a robot. And I'm interested to know how that would make you feel, because I think this happens a lot. The advisors tend to be very friendly and you'll have a good meeting, and then they get the reports or the suitability letters, which are very formal, which don't sound anything like the advisor because they're heavily templated. So I think it's worth considering this, because actually the trouble with using a lot of templates is, as we said, when there's that inconsistency of tone, it can erode trust. And they're like, hang on a second, that sounds very different from the friendly person that I met. Often clients can feel like they're just a number. They don't feel special or unique. Often, if people are using a lot of templates and they don't keep their reader in mind, they can include a lot of irrelevant information because they're not customizing the report to what the client needs. And that then can lead to poor experience. And also, I think a lot of the templates are very much focused on the data and the information. They don't give that much attention to how to create attention and how to lay them out in a way that's engaging and enjoyable to read. So the rules of thumb here is hold your client in mind when you write again. And I'm not suggesting that you should reinvent the wheel every time, of course, but I think there is a balance to be struck between having certain phrases that you can use and certain explanations of certain concepts, but making sure it's all super tailored to your reader. The 4th is focusing a lot of time on information. And I know this is one of the popular ones we had today, and not enough on engagement. So this can be quite a typical report that I see. You know, what's your first impression of that document? Jot that in the chat. What's your first impression? looks like one of mine. Too many bullets, no formatting. Yeah, you know, if that came across someone's desk and they had a lot of things vying for their attention, I think it can feel like that's going to be hard work to read. Too many bullets, no formatting. Yes, exactly. So that's exactly someone who spent a lot of time on the research, probably taken them loads of time to read, to create, and yet might easily get ignored, which means that you're then going to have to chase and follow up. And, ultimately that's not fun, no fun for anybody. So this is why I'm so keen on helping you understand how to grab and maintain attention. Because if we don't, we can, yeah, interrupt and make sure, and just give our client a poor experience. And because the competition is so fierce out there, we might run the risk of losing them. So when you're thinking about how to lay documents out, it's something I cover in the framework. But one of the key things is to, because we are a nation of skimmers, not readers, is to think about how easily is my key message going to jump out at them. So even if they didn't read the whole thing, I could very easily point to, this is what you need to know. And then lastly, number 5 is lacking this simple process to ensure that we're getting attention, that ensure that we're conveying information so it can be well understood, and then we're generating action. And all of those things can help us comply with the duty. And I think what I notice is that often firms will have very slick processes in place to ensure compliance and manage risk and set up good investment strategies, but actually don't have much in the way of a client engagement process, which helps them meet the regulation and increase retention. And I think what you might notice if you don't have a process in place is you might be getting ghosted. Clients might be calling you up or asking you a lot of questions because they don't quite understand what you've written. Or, like what's happening now with the movements in the markets, they're phoning up and they're really panicked because they don't necessarily understand that markets move and that's what they do. Maybe you're having to do a lot of chasing. Maybe you feel like actually you're adding loads of value to your clients' lives. You're giving them loads of peace of mind, but actually the communication doesn't necessarily reflect that. Maybe you're having to spend more time checking your team's reports than you'd like to. You could be losing good clients, or you could be worried about receiving complaints. And I think sometimes what I notice is that one of the reasons reports are very long is because people haven't quite understood the regulation and what actually needs to be in a report. So they put a lot of information in, but they fail to realize that actually we should also be concerned about the Financial Ombudsman Service. And so if you're not aware of who is in the Financial Ombudsman Service, it's made up of lay people and some professionals as well. But if a lay person couldn't understand the advice, then the chances are that a complaint would be upheld. So we have to pay attention to, are we making this advice simple and easy for the lay person to understand? And that way we'll be helping to mitigate complaints. Because of course, readability is one thing, and that's what we've been focusing on, but helping clients to actually understand the advice is another. And of course, the regulation is all about understanding. FCA says we want consumers to understand the information so that they can make that informed decision in a timely, in timely ways. So Gareth is someone that went through the process. He was someone that was really frustrated that his templates were clunky and very formal, jargon heavy, not many diagrams. And he hadn't even got halfway through the process, which I'll share with you in a moment. And he got an unprompted email from a client saying, thanks for making that so easy to understand. You've been in the industry a long time, never received an email like that. Charlie was someone else. She'd been struggling to get hold of a high net worth client for a while, actually. And then she learned about structuring requests and then received a response the next day. So this is the power of the framework that I want to take you through now, which is what I take all my clients through. So we look at attention. How do we grab that attention and keep it through the documents? How do we get action so we're not following up and chasing and nudging and using a psychology-informed approach? It gets really quick results. We then look at how do we articulate these technical concepts so that readers get it. We're looking at using AI prompts to create diagrams so it's super quick. Then we're looking at what needs to come out of the report so you're compliant, but you're also very clear. Then we look at how you assemble it. So how do you make it look good on the page? And lastly, then, how do we assimilate all of this so that you can set up good habits? I've basically set it out so that it's a blend of self-paced, so you do it at your own time, but we also have follow-up calls. This will hold you accountable, and it really brings the information to life. As part of it, there are assignments, very short ones, but I want to be reassured that you can actually use these skills. That's how you get the results. And then you get tailored feedback from me. If you'd like to learn more about that, book a call. It's not right for everybody, but I want to make sure that you're a good fit. Takes about 12 hours to complete. And yeah, we're kicking off on Friday, but the first deadline isn't until the 1st of May. All of those Q&As are recorded as well. And I've made it super accessible from a price point perspective because I really want to ensure that we're changing those readability statistics. So it's only £397 currently. So if that sounds of interest, scan that code, we'll jump on a call, and the first 10 that join will also get my ACR annual review pack, which really is packed full of templates and letters and checklists and conversation prompts, particularly, now when annual reviews are very important in terms of how we're reassuring panicking clients. So, yes, just finally, you'll be reassured that we do get impact really quickly. I halfway through the course, I email everybody's managers and just say, "Are you noticing any difference?" And this was some lovely feedback we got a couple of weeks ago. So you can now avoid those common pitfalls which lead to writing being ignored. So try and stay out of the jargon. Keep your sentences short. Keep one idea per sentence. Get really clear on what does and doesn't need to be in the report. If you're using templates, can you tailor them so that you're striking a better balance between what the client wants to know and that also sounds like you? Give more time to actually making this writing and this advice engaging rather than just information. There's a lovely quote from Sydney Harris who says, the words information and communication are often used interchangeably, but they actually signify quite different things. Information is giving out, but communication is getting through. And that's what the engagement piece does. And if you haven't got a process, then really think about what could you do to make your process more engaging. And if you're struggling, come and join me on the Communicate for Impact program. When you're thinking about how to adopt the right mindset, remember, hold them in your mind. Write for your reader. That's the one message that I really want you to take away from today. Write for your reader. That will then help you choose the right words. It will help you determine the level of detail that you want to go into. And also, it will then help you write from their perspective. And now you can recognize that 6-step framework that I went through, which is how to grab attention, how to write in a way that gets action, how to articulate technical concepts, how to axe useless information or irrelevant information, how to assemble it so it looks nice, and then how to assimilate all that you've learned and set up good habits. So yes, you can book a call if you'd like to. So now we've got some time for questions, if anyone has any. I wanted to leave plenty of time because often this material does spark some questions or challenges or anything. So if you want to just pop those through the chat, I shall do what I can to help. Does anyone have any questions? Maybe everyone's feeling a little bit bank holiday-ish. I realise this is quite an early start, but if you haven't, that's absolutely fine. My email address is there. So if you'd rather ask me a question directly, please feel free. Yeah, if you wanted the recording, hopefully you've connected with me on LinkedIn if we're not connected already. Yeah, and if you'd like to join the program, it'd be great to have you. Let's book a call. So I'll leave it there. I hope that was useful. Do let me know, and yeah, I hope to see you again.